All right, let's get straight into it. Welcome to this executive briefing. If you're an institutional leader, a policymaker, or anyone steering resource allocation right now, you are in exactly the right place. Today's explainer is tackling a massive, permanent shift in our operational reality. We're talking about the exact moment automated AI research and development crosses over from being speculative science fiction straight into near-term corporate forecasting. We'll be drawing heavily from Thorsten Mayer's really penetrating analysis of a recent landscape-altering essay by Jack Clark. We've got a lot of vital, frankly urgent ground to cover, so let's just jump right into the data.
Okay, let's dive right into this quote. You see, this isn't from some sci-fi novelist or a cultural commentator. It's from Jack Clark, a co-founder of a frontier AI lab. When someone actively building these massive systems publicly comes out and declares, "I'm persuaded," we have officially crossed a major discourse threshold. Look, this is hard executive data. It's a very public articulation of an internal corporate consensus. The frontier labs are absolutely no longer treating automated AI as some distant maybe. Because of the sheer gravity of this shift, we're keeping our agenda super tight today. Here's the bottom line up front. 1. The ghost story's over. 2. Staring at the probabilities. 3. Decoding the 40%. 4. Corporate calendar milestones. 5. The structural strategic implication. And 6. The leadership action checklist.
Let's kick things off with Section 1. The ghost story is over. For decades, treating AGI or automated AI R&D as just some science fiction ghost story, well, it was the perfect excuse for institutions to basically do nothing. I mean, if something is just science fiction, it's not exactly your department's problem, right? You don't need to allocate capital or stress test your 5-year strategy against a movie plot. But this brings us to what Meyer calls a discourse threshold crossing. When the builders themselves start publicly validating these trend lines, it's an explicit invitation. Honestly, it's an operational mandate for corporate strategy to update its baseline assumptions. The cultural inertia might still be lagging, sure, but your strategic framing has to shift immediately from speculative future to operational near-term reality. It is time to allocate your resources accordingly.
Which takes us right into Section 2, staring at the probabilities.
This right here is perhaps the single most important structural finding from the analysis. We are no longer talking about vague, open-ended timelines. We now have concrete probabilities attached to specific calendar years. Now, what's really interesting about this is the bivalence. Jack Clark assigns a 60% central forecast probability to automated AI R&D arriving by the end of 2028. Just let that sink in for a second. 2028. But equally crucial is the other side of that coin, the 40% chance it doesn't happen by 2028. Both the 60% occurrence and the 40% non-occurrence are major structural findings, and both require immediate institutional planning.
But wait, before we unpack that 40%, we have to highlight this terrifyingly high alternative forecast. Clark notes that, if pushed, there's actually a 30% probability of automated AI R&D arriving by the end of 2027. Think about that. That was just 17 months from the publication date of Meyer's analysis. In the forecasting world, assigning a 30% probability to a monumental, world-altering event happening in a 17-month window is incredibly aggressive. It means these labs are actively executing toward this right now, and it radically changes what kind of institutional response is even feasible to build in time.
All right, Section 3, decoding the 40%. So what exactly is going on with that 40%? Well, there are two ways to look at it. The benign reading is kind of the comforting one. Maybe we just run out of high-quality data or compute, progress naturally slows down, and we buy ourselves a few more years. Automated R&D happens in, say, 2030 instead of 2028. But Clark's reading, the really urgent reality here, is entirely different. He suggests that if we don't hit it by 2028, it likely means we've hit a fundamental deficiency within the current technological paradigm itself. It means the current engineering trajectory has literally hit a hard ceiling, and the entire field is going to have to go all the way back to the drawing board.
The deciding factor between wild success and hitting that brick wall is what Meyer calls the creativity hinge. Look, the engineering part of AI is already highly automated. The residual bottleneck left over is true research and heterodox creativity. So the question is human creativity a permanent moat, or is it just compressed perspiration that massive amounts of compute can eventually brute force? Clark's 60% forecast is essentially sitting right at the median between these two readings, and over the next 12 to 18 months, discoveries in AI math like that recent Erdos 105 result or Centaur math, they're going to empirically resolve whether AI can actually automate that true creative spark.
Let's move on to Section 4. The corporate calendar milestones.
We are shifting from theoretical probabilities to hard physical evidence, and it is backed by billions in capital. These targets on the timeline aren't just arbitrary guesses pulled out of thin air. We have OpenAI's publicly stated target for an automated AI research intern by September 2026. We have Anthropic's massive IPO target set for Q4 2026. These are endogenous forecasts driven by major labs executing against stated corporate goals. The 30% and 60% probability horizons are directly tethered to these organizations hitting their internal engineering milestones. They are quite literally betting their capital on it.
Which brings us to Section 5, the structural strategic implication. When frontier labs actually commit to this kind of capability cascade, what does it genuinely mean for you? This quote brilliantly illustrates the stakes, a profound change in how the world works. Again, coming from a Frontier Labs executive preparing for massive capital events, you have to understand this is not marketing copy. Marketing language is soft. Corporate strategy language is hedged. This is an actual executive assessment. When the builders themselves tell you the world is about to fundamentally change, the only rational structural response is to treat it as absolutely critical data for your own internal planning.
If that 2028 central forecast holds, we are looking at a 32-month window. That is a rapidly, drastically closing window for the alignment community, for regulatory bodies, and for your institutional safety frameworks to prepare. Right now, today, the institutional capacity to enforce safety constraints across these competing labs simply does not exist. The verification infrastructure is structurally inadequate. We are in a dead sprint against the corporate calendar, and the clock is loudly ticking down from 32 months. So the crucial point is right here in Section 6, the Leadership Action Checklist. If you are steering an institution right now, here is exactly what you need to do immediately. This is the definitive 3-step checklist synthesizing Thorsten Meyer's call for structural readiness. Step 1. Update your institutional frame today. You've got to move this topic out of the Sci-Fi bucket and straight into the near-term operational bucket. Step 2. Allocate resource capacity. You need real resources dedicated to safety, coordination, and alignment, and you need them right now. Step 3. Plan for bivalent outcomes. Your strategy has to be robust enough to handle the 60% chance of an automated R&D world by 2028 and the 40% chance that the AI industry hits a paradigm wall and has to fundamentally reset. I want to hammer this point home because it's an absolute operational imperative. This is all about the asymmetric cost of being wrong. Think about it. If you build your response capacity now and the timeline happens to extend, well, you're simply well prepared for the eventual transition. No harm done. But if you don't build it and those 30 or 60% timelines actually hit, it is catastrophic. There's literally no scenario where building the capacity right now is a wasted effort.
I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to take back to your boardroom. The ghost story? It's over. The forecast is officially live. The corporate milestones are set in stone. So, is your organization's resource allocation and safety framework truly ready for the 32-month countdown? I highly encourage you to review your allocations today, based on the operational reality we've just mapped out together. Thanks so much for joining this explainer, and we will definitely see you next time as we continue to track these accelerating trend lines.